Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Today, I'm talking with Dr. David Phelps. He's a nationally recognized speaker on creating freedom, one of our biggest topics, building real business and investing in real estate to get that freedom. He combines his professional and personal experience to illustrate how the tactical and the aspirational work together. David helps other logical, rational professionals become dreamers, then strategically manifest those dreams into freedom. He authors a monthly newsletter, Path to Freedom. He hosts the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast, and he is the founder of Freedom Founders Mastermind Community, which is growing exponentially. It's a great community for you to find out how to find this freedom. It's growing year by year, providing pathway to freedom for many people who are professional practice owners. David, it's a joy to have you with us today.
Chuck, it's always fun to have conversations with you. I'm interested in jumping in today with you.
Yeah, well, today we're going to talk about if associates should have ownership, actual ownership in a practice, and then if so, how do you get that done? So let's just start with that basic practice. Should associates have true and actual ownership in a practice?
Well, that's great, Chuck. And, we can go a lot of different ways with this, and that's what I love about talking with you is we'll take it where it needs to go. And I'm interested in your feedback as well. So the actual question, should associates have actual ownership? Well, then the associate at that point is not an associate. Now the associate has turned into a partner of some kind. So that's right. That's a key. That's a key. I think you have to back into that and say, the answer would really is it depends.
Yes.
It depends on who you are as the original owner of the practice. What are you looking for? What are you trying to achieve with either an associate or associate that moves to a financial partner? Somebody who has actually a financial stakeholder in the business versus, the stakeholder that you talk about, which is another type, but also important. There's a lot of considerations here, Chuck.
Yeah,
I was in practice for private practice for just over 20 years, and for most of my practice, I did have one, sometimes two, and at one point as many as three associates. Only towards the end of my career, when I was intentional about wanting to exit for reasons that I talk about in other episodes, is I was prepared to outline a pathway for one of the associates, or could have been multiple, to move into ownership. But before that time, I was also very intentional about the fact that I wanted to have all that control. I wanted 100% control of the practice. I didn't want to let anybody have any say-so in the practice. So that both sides have the pros and cons. We both know that. And so deciding what you want, it makes a big difference as to how you go along this route. Let me let you jump in.
No, I agree. I think I keep hearing I keep seeing in my head a row of diapers in the Safeway in the King Soopers. It depends.
Exactly.
Because it really does depend. I would say number one, I would start with this. If someone is going to have ownership, the only way they would have ownership is because they are already acting like an owner. And I think we miss this wholesale in dentistry. We just assume when we're recruiting an associate that part of their contract is within 1 year or whatever, within 18 months, you will have X percentage of ownership in this, and you'll be buying in. And there's this pathway that's outlined with absolutely no understanding of whether this person will actually want to be and act like an owner. And I think that's a big issue in dentistry. We've got to figure that one out. How do we get past that? I want people who will actually say, I want ownership because I've proved that I am an owner. And we do that in our business. We tell people you can have ownership, but you have to act like an owner first. It's not something you act like after it happens. It's something that you should be before. So that would be my first blush on this. And that would take us out of a lot of the ways that people become owners in most practices, which is just because you showed up.
Yeah, no, very good point. When I had associates in my practice, Chuck, as simply associates with no pathway, no discussion on the front end about being owners, I had some good associates, but the problem is it's a revolving door. most people, not all, but most people who come on as an associate, they're doing that to buy time, to pay off debt, to learn the ropes, which is a good idea.
Yep.
But most of the time, if there's not a pathway for an associate to see clearly how they could become an owner, and again, there's processes to do that. As you said, it's not just an automatic come on in. There's got to be trial periods set in place. There's got to be milestones set, but that can be set up in advance. Most of the time, when senior docs bring on associates, it's again the problem with everything we do in our lives, in our world, is we have no real plan as to what we're trying to achieve, and so it's the blind leading the blind. It truly is. Senior doc, again, could be a great doc, could have a great practice, but again, where's the experience in bringing on potentially a financial partner? Well, there is none unless you get help from somebody. And that's the key to everything in life. Get help from people who've gone down that road. Find out what the obstacles are and build those in from the front end. Chuck, it's no different than a marriage. You go to marriage counseling, right? And you get some things in place on the front end, because if you just go into it blindly, you may love the person to death, but we both know it's a lot of work. Any kind of partnership's a lot of work, and associateship as well. So if there's not clear dialogue, intentions, a roadmap, a plan, a blueprint put in place as to how this is supposed to work, whether you're going to keep the person as associate, period, understand what that means. That person's probably eventually going to get tired of just being the associate. But again, there's cases where there's certain people who find that desirable. So choosing who you bring in has everything to do with what outcome you want to achieve, right?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We probably should have opened with this. Why would you want to have someone be an owner as an associate? And there's good reasons for that. You just pointed out. One would be to create stability in the organization. If they're owners, they're not going to leave. If they're associates, then it's going to be that revolving door. So to me, I'm a big fan of ownership. And that's one of the reasons why, is to create stability for my patients and for the reputation of this thing, and for me to begin to get off the treadmill, if that's how you want to do it. But do it with people who actually will act like owners. Otherwise, they're not actually assets, they're liabilities. So I'm a big fan of doing it, but do it with the right people at the right time.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was early in practice, again, as I said earlier, it was the fear of what I didn't know.
Right.
And that fear was, if I give up ownership too early in my career, I didn't have a plan. Now, I didn't take time to study a plan. So fortunately, I didn't just drop off in the deep water and do it without help. When I was ready to make that step, when I knew with intentionality that I didn't want to just have associates, I wanted to have someone step up and become an owner, then yes, I got help. I got help from people who had done it multiple times. People like you who are in practices and in industries where you've had the practice transition, or again, in this case, the owner operator wants more time. They want to be more of a business owner. I 100% agree. The stability that you have by sharing the load, by already having in place people who can step in and operate the services if and when you don't want to, or maybe you can't. I mean, that's an insurance policy in itself. So designing it that way, I think, makes a lot of sense. Too many well-intentioned docs think that, well, I'll just bring in an associate who will just, do a lot of the work for me, and that's all the planning they put into it. And that's failure from the get-go. Even if you want to have just an associate for a time being, you've got to, again, figure out a plan to let that associate have some ability to grow. Are you prepared to be the mentor? Because many young docs, they need that. And it's a great service to do, but do you want to be that mentor? And if you don't set up a pathway for them to grow into the practice and ultimately have ownership, you may be doing a nice service to mentor that young doctor, who will then take what they learned from you and go off somewhere else. If you're okay with that, go ahead. But you're going to put a lot of time as a senior doc into oversight and mentoring. So do you want to grow that person to somebody who can be an asset in your practice, or you want to grow that person to be an asset somewhere else? Again, that's what you've got to think about, right?
Well, there's two paths that come to mind for me when I think of people who are going to be owners in the practice. There are the people that I would think of as technical experts and the dental professional, and then there would be the business expert, the business professional. And depending on the size of the practice, I could see myself bringing on both of those. But I would bring them on differently, and they would have different reward and risk scenarios. If I'm bringing on someone who's a dental professional, I want someone who just loves dentistry, never wants to be involved in the business, wants to just they're absorbed in the idea of how do I build great margins in people's mouths. And I want that guy and I want him to stay. Well, that deserves ownership. But be very clear with that person. I'm not anticipating you being involved in the business. And by the way, this isn't by the way, but there's ways to write these contracts to make decision-making anything you want it to be. So someone can be an owner in a business, but they can only have decision-making ability in this particular thing. You can write any contract you want. So I would have a technical expert over here and I would say, okay, you're going to have input on anything that has to do with the actual dentistry itself. But you're not going to have much, I'm always going to get your input, but you're not going to have any final say. You won't keep me from doing things on the business side. But then you might have a business person who you would have an entirely different contract with. Say, okay, you have, I want you as a dentist or whatever, I want you to grow into the business side of this, and that's what they want. And you can see they have the acumen for it. They have that mentoring, that leadership, all of those non-dentistry business things. I want you to grow into that. They want to grow into that. That's another person I could see bringing into the practice. But I think we can be very clear that it's two different paths. I have a friend who is he's a fellow at this company that does, I don't know if I want to use their names or not. It's a very large company, but they have two paths. There's 50,000 people in this company and they have two paths. They have paths for technicians and they have paths for business leaders. And they're very different things. The technicians aren't expected to do any of the business stuff. They're just technically brilliant. And every time they solve something, they get more money and get raised to a different level of fellowship. And he basically is one of 6 fellows reporting directly to the CEO, along with 6 business leaders. And they get paid, the fellow that gets paid pretty much the same as the business leader does. And they find their value on that side of the equation. So I think those are 2 different ways to bring somebody on. And then you can devise the contracts any way that the 2 of you would agree on. Because I know some doctors who are really great artists don't want the pressure of ownership because they're afraid they have to get involved in the business side. It would actually be a load off them for you to say, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you are so right, Chuck. This comes down to, the principles that you teach so well. And what I found so much in, my current love for what I do with Freedom Founders, no longer in clinical practice, but still helping my colleagues just through lessons and things I've learned in my own life. And what I found within my own team, of which there are no other financial partners, but creating the culture that you talk about where we have real stakeholders, where yes, I am the leader and I will ultimately make final decisions, but I always involve my stakeholders, my team in everything we do. In fact, I want them involved. I want them to be like my mini mastermind where, here's David, he's got another 1,000 ideas, right? and I come at him, but they know that I'm going to allow them. In fact, I want them to have input. So you do the same thing in your practice with your staff, even associates or even minority partners. If you make sure that they know they always have the right to be heard, now you're building a culture of ownership, whether they actually de facto have real ownership or they have the emotional knowledge that they are an active player that brings meaning and purpose. I mean, it just means so much to people to have that. The other thing you said too, talked about is the different kinds of people. And you're right. I failed to say this earlier on, but there's a generation of younger people coming out of school and entering the workplace today that are different from our generation, Chuck. And there's no right or wrong here, but they're looking at quality of life earlier.
That's
a
right.
lot of us in our generation, we both admit to it. Hard drivers, not doing things always the right way, not finding that, quote, hard to find balance in life. Well, young people today, a lot of them are looking more for quality early, and I admire that in them. So you're right.
Yes.
There's those who would love to be in the culture where they do have a say. They feel like there's somebody important. They're not just managed, right? But they have a say. And if they want to be that technical expert and really do the craft that they learn, and then go home at the end of the day and spend time with their family and their kids, and then show up the next day, there's a place for people like that. And so identifying, again, what we need or want in our practice, it's kind of like the professional practice, the professional athlete groups, right? So really good teams. New England Patriots. So Bill Belichick, just to go off on a tangent here, he's been so good over so many years by just looking for the best athlete. And when he finds one with the right leadership qualities, he brings them in, he drafts them. He doesn't have to pay them excessively. He puts them in the right seat So instead of trying to plug people in and force them into a seat they're not good at, he's really good at doing that. I think we've got to do that in our lives and our businesses and practices. Decide what kind of culture we want to have, and then build that around the best people, identify who they are, and have that conversation on the front end so the goals can be aligned. Or if they're not, very early you can figure out, well, there's not alignment here, so this person may not be the best fit. You remove all those obstacles and that the throes of disorganization, disarray when things fall apart because we didn't have those conversations at the very beginning.
Yeah, and that's an important way to do this. If you're going to bring, or an important point, if you're bringing on associates, you should have a real clear path for how that happens. And the contractual nature of that, or the understanding of what it takes to become an associate, should be laid out very clearly for them, almost like not a prenup, but in that kind of idea of having a contract rather than just winging it and coming into it ad hoc. I think every associate that comes on board should have the opportunity to become an owner, but only under certain circumstances. And then we should lay those out very clearly. So for instance, the technical professional. Well, I want you to be doing X amount of revenue. You have to reach this kind of proficiency where you can be doing X amount of revenue per month and have this kind of satisfaction from your patients. There are 3 measures of incentives that we talk about: quality, quantity, and happiness. How many people did you see? How well did you do the dentistry? And how happy are they? You can actually see a lot of people and do great dentistry and have everybody ticked off at you, or vice versa. So it's all 3. You have to have all 3. And those are significant measures. You can set those up and you can actually tier it. Hey, well, if you get to this point, then you can have this much ownership. If you get to this point, you can have that much ownership. And that can be a very clear laid out path. And then they get to decide their future. That's one of the things that, again, drives me crazy about the way most practices are still doing this. We're stuck in the industrial age. You know, you mentioned my second book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. And the idea behind that book is that so much of what we're doing is stuck in the industrial age. This is one of them. I'm going to pay you because you sat in the chair for another year. You're going to become an actual owner in this place because you were here for a whole year. Well, how did you perform? How committed are you? What's your passion? Are you embracing our values, our vision, our mission? Are you a true stakeholder, or are you just acting like an employee? There's so many things that factor into that. And all we're looking at is the guy sat in a chair for a whole year. I guess I have to make him an owner.
Right.
Let's lay out a path. Let's lay out a path that has the quality, the quantity, the happiness in it. And we can do the very same thing for the business person. If you grow this from here to here, you get this. If you grow it from here to here. And then it's all on them. They get to be adults and they get to decide if they actually want ownership.
Yeah, that roadmap, that path is so critical. And you're right, Chuck, there's different metrics that need to be measured along the way. When you have a pathway roadmap that's built out with specifics in it, and you said, quantity, quality, happiness, that happiness factor, I think we all tend to forget about it. We think just because we're happy with currently, that everybody else is happy. And, again, every individual in this world has their own way of measuring that happiness factor. And many times if we don't take the feedback in and listen and to what people are looking for, then we can't ever make a change there. And there's not that we are responsible for people's happiness, but if there's ways that we can change the environment that suits someone, again, like the athlete on the team, suits them better in a certain way to make that happen, that's where you have longevity. People that get stressed out in whatever job position that they have in life, they're the ones that leave. And they could be doing a good job. They could be a rock star in your business. But the problem is we never address those. We never get the feedback. We never have a system to get feedback and see where people are. Take a temperature check. There's so many ways to do that and measure that. And we found, within my own team that's a very important part to measure people, to see where their stress levels are. They may be doing a great job, but if that person is really stressed out, eventually they're going to blow up. They're going to go home and talk to their spouse and say, I can't take it anymore. And the spouse is going to say, you know what? It's time for you to get out. And we never took the opportunity to have the conversation. Great person. We just didn't help mold the opportunity because we didn't get the feedback. We didn't have the milestones. We didn't have the systems in place to get that feedback.
So we measure that happiness in 3 different ways. One of them is just the one you're talking about. How happy is this associate here, and how satisfied are they with their position? If they're not happy here, then they shouldn't be an owner. But we also then would require that they satisfy their patients, that there's a happiness level there. And in a third way, they have to be a good member of the community of people in our practice. So we actually have a survey that we do every other month on a scale of 1 to 10. How well does so-and-so contribute to the production of our team? How well do they uphold the values, the vision, the mission? We all do that of every one of us. We get the aggregate average of that. We get it's a blind survey, and all I get is an average that says I got a 8 point whatever that month. And that tells me how I'm doing in terms of making the associates around and the people around me, the team members, happy. And then we do the same thing with our clients once a quarter. There's lots of ways now to do that in dentistry. So that should become part of the things that we measure when we want to give someone ownership in the practice. Well, we're about out of time here, but I want to make sure we invest a little time in this idea of the Freedom Founders Mastermind community. You're big on helping people find freedom. What is the Freedom Founders Mastermind all about? I know you didn't ask me to ask that, but I'd like to delve into that just for 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds, Chuck. Well, high level view is certainly we always want to help people focus on what we're talking about today, their practice, their business. That's the engine for everything, and we don't want anybody to take their eye off the ball. That's why we had you come speak there, because we're so focused there. Once people optimize and can amplify their current business, now they're into what I call the wealth building sector. That's the inflection point where you can start building wealth outside the practice, should you desire to do that, and that builds up passive income, which then can replace your active income. So it gives you more options earlier in life. You can still stay in practice, do the practice the way you want to. You can exit practice. It's all about options and freedom in life. That's my 30-second. I think I did it in 15. So how's that?
I think you did, and I love your emphasis on freedom, because that is the reason you shouldn't want to get off the treadmill, is to have freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose what to do with my time and my money. And you just said it. Keep practicing if you want to, but what if you didn't have to?
Yes.
Then you get to. And I can tell you, going through 5 businesses myself where I had to go to work, and then finally figuring out how to get freedom where I get to go to work. I go to work, I work harder, I work faster, I work longer, because I get to rather than I have to. It's a whole different mindset. So if you guys haven't checked out the Freedom Founders Mastermind community, please do so. David, give us some ideas on how we can find you and your book and your podcast.
Yeah, easiest place, Chuck, is just the main website, which is freedomfounders.com. All resources are there, so I'd love to have people engage with us. Chuck, I love what you do. It is all about freedom, and freedom changes everything. I'll never stop. I'll never retire. I know you won't either. When you get to do what you love to do every day, it changes life, and I want everybody to get there sooner, not later.
All right, guys, you heard it. Check out Dr. David Phelps at freedomfounders.com, and we look forward to talking to you again. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Chuck.
If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com, or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.